Well, coronavirus has certainly dominated our discourse globally. It's killed over 228,000 people, but it has also led to another global crisis, a surge in the number of cases of domestic abuse world over, especially in Latin America. In a region where 20 million women and girls suffer from some form of abuse every year, calls to hotlines and police centers have soared. The UN Women, in a report today, said that there was evidence of rising violence against women in Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and a doubling in the number of femicides in Argentina during the lockdown. In Mexico, the number of calls to helplines has soared, reporting domestic abuse and violence. Emergency calls to the National Refugee Network, a Mexican NGO, was reported to have increased 60% since the beginning of the lockdown. According to the femicide map, around the country, around 200 women have been murdered since the quarantine measures began. Activists in Mexico are now calling on authorities to implement policies to protect women.
No hay un mecanismo real que impida que las mujeres sigan siendo asesinadas en sus domicilios en este confinamiento.
In Argentina, the government helpline has seen a 67% rise in the number of calls for help in April since the lockdown began. 18 women have been killed by their partners in the first 20 days of the quarantine. In Sao Paulo, the epicenter of Brazil's COVID-19 outbreak, reports of domestic violence have risen 45%. In Colombia, daily domestic violence calls for the National Women's Hotline were up nearly 130% during the first 18 days of the quarantine. In Chile, complaints of domestic violence are up by a record 500% in an upper-class neighborhood in the capital, Santiago. But it's not just Latin America. The United Nations predicts at least 15 million more cases of domestic violence around the world. So as women remain trapped with their abusers at home, governments around the world are dealing with a new crisis they never imagined. And WION correspondent Mary Trini is now live with us from Caracas in Venezuela for the latest. And Mary, thanks for talking to us this evening. Now, how is Venezuela handling the quarantine? What are the measures that the government is taking there?
So far, Venezuela has reported 300 cases. It is one of the countries in Latin America with less cases reported in comparison with Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru. However, the government is taking strict measures. They declare a nationwide quarantine over a month ago. They are asking the citizens to remain at their homes as much as possible, and only essential workers are allowed to be in the street. They are also prohibiting flights coming and going from Venezuela and prohibiting all large gatherings inside the country. They say they have the situation under control, but they don't want more cases. They don't want that the situation that happened in Europe, it could be translated to Latin America. So they want control over the number of cases that they have so far.
Right. And Mary, of course, also we believe that domestic abuse cases are rising all over Latin America. What more do you know about this?
Yes, as you were mentioned, these numbers, the rise of numbers of cases on domestic violence in the region is a concern for many non-governmental organizations. The experts are calling this the new pandemic or the hidden pandemic, a situation that is happening in the household during the quarantine. In Argentina, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, and also Venezuela, the rise of cases is notorious, and in most cases, the victims is inside the house with the perpetrator of the cases. And what they are trying to do is demanding and asking the governments to protect the women and children mostly that are victims of these cases, and asking them to provide them more support. For example, they are asking more helping lines for them, and also more digital tools for them to denounce all these cases. And what they are trying to say to the victim is that they have to look for safety. If they are under quarantine, they have to look for a new place to stay. For example, the house of a relative that they can go if they are victim of domestic violence.
Right, Mary Trini, thanks very much indeed for joining us and sharing what's happening in Latin America with the number of cases and, of course, the rise in the number of